Hi there, and welcome to the show. I am your host, John Ivison, and this week I'm joined by my National Post Ottawa Bureau colleagues, Ryan Tumilty and Catherine Levesque. We're going to talk about foreign interference. Welcome to both of you. Now, the viewers, I'm sure, will appreciate having some real hard-nosed reporters rather than namby-pamby, chin-stroking columnists. So let's get to it. We were all in the lockup earlier this week. We were covering the special rapporteur's David Johnston's first report on foreign interference in the Canadian electoral process. We all went in there wondering whether there was going to be a recommendation for a public inquiry. I guess the first clue should have been the report. It said first report, which implied there would be a second report, and presumably by David Johnston, which turns out to be the case, and therefore no public inquiry. Do you think his arguments against a public inquiry hold water, Catherine?
Well, look, I think, it is fair to say that David Johnston said that, coming into this process, the easy thing to do would be to recommend a public inquiry just because everyone has been asking for one. And look, he makes a number of arguments in this report saying, look, this would just essentially duplicate his efforts, everything he's been doing for the last 2 months. This would also waste some time, essentially, because a commissioner would just have to redo the same thing and kind of, interview a bunch of people and look at the same documents. But I think, what really stood out to me is the fact that, he is arguing that most of this process would have to be held in camera because we're talking about national intelligence, because we're talking about really sensitive documents. That I think is, an aspect that, and Ryan and I have been covering parliamentary committees, and certainly that's what we've been seeing, is that a lot of people, are being asked questions and simply cannot answer because they don't have the right to do so. So we've seen a little bit, what if a public inquiry could look like. So, I think these arguments do make sense. I think, it is fair to say that he is still recommending a public process. But at the same time, I think where the issue lies in this particular aspect is the fact that he is going to be the one, David Johnston is going to be the one taking care of this public process and these consultations. And I think that's really the key of the key issue here.
Right. I agree with you. I mean, I think that he made fair points on duplication, expediency, probably problems of talking in public about sensitive intelligence. But I think his overarching goal should have been to restore trust in our democracy. And given the controversy around his appointment, perhaps the only way to do that was to step aside and let a judge take over. What do you think, Ryan? I mean, I think it's unfortunate he didn't do that. I think it taints this first report. I think it probably taints his second report. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think there's a problem here, definitely. I mean, as much as I don't think any lawyer, and David Johnston asked a lawyer, in fact, he asked a retired Supreme Court judge about this, I think any lawyer would say that this is a conflict of interest. David Johnston doesn't stand to gain from this in any way. But it is that appearance of a public, of a perception of a conflict of interest here that I think is going to be a problem for them. It's going to be a problem for his report going forward. I think his expediency argument, though, is interesting because, we've talked a lot about this. The 2019 and the 2021 elections are in the rearview mirror, but there will be another one next year, maybe this year, maybe the year after, but there will be an election, and foreign governments are going to do this again. And so, we can't control that, but we can control our response. And the track record of public inquiries is normally that they take 2, 3, even 4 years. That's what Air India took. So, they wouldn't provide quick solutions.
Right, but the Rouleau Commission was done and dusted in a year.
It was, but that was part of the legislation, and Rouleau did nothing but complain about how short a time period he had to look into these things.
True. So I was writing today that the Governor General, or the former Governor General, spent so much time debunking the media narrative, which was that the Liberals failed to act on foreign interference because it helped them politically, that he buried the lead. Essentially, that he could have written this report a very different way, namely that the access that he had to all the secret information, top secret intelligence, allowed him to paint a fuller picture of what was actually going on than we've had hitherto. Do you think we know more today than we did on Monday, Ryan?
I think we do. I think you're right, though, about the way David Johnston downplayed some of this. Now we know that some of what was reported in the media was absolutely true, that there was interest in China and continues to be interest from the Chinese government in interfering in our elections. But he did, give us some more insight into some of what's been reported, the shades of it, I guess. We know, for example, that there were concerns about Toronto Liberal MP Han Dong and his nomination contest and irregularities in that contest, that he does seem to have ties to the consulate in Toronto. But at the same time, we also found out from Mr. Johnston, who says he's seen all the intelligence on this file, that the notion that Han Dong tried to prevent or encourage the Chinese government to hold on to Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor was, in the words of Mr. Johnston, absolutely false. I think that's a big piece of information. And there were lots of other things like that.
But let's take that one, because Catherine, not so much the one about recommending that the two Michaels be kept in jail in China, but when he looked at the instance of Han Dong and his nomination, he spent quite a bit of time saying that, Han Dong didn't know anything about this, that it was never relayed to the Prime Minister's office, that essentially that the political actors are blameless. But it's there in black and white that that CSIS thinks there were irregularities in that nomination process. And to me, that's the headline. He was talking about being that the specific instances of interference are less concerning than the media reported. To me, that's pretty concerning.
It is pretty concerning. And I think, David Johnston kind of smooths over the fact that, yes, foreign interference is happening, and it is happening specifically from Beijing. I mean, he spent so much time in his report kind of, I'm sorry, but blasting the media reports and saying they were inaccurate, that, he kind of barely spent any time saying that, yes, actually, a lot of these things were true and they are concerning. And to your point about Han Dong, I mean, absolutely. I think, it's clear from the intelligence, at least from David Johnston has seen. Look, he did say what Global News said that he said to the consulate in Toronto, the Chinese consulate. Basically, he said quite the opposite, that he wanted them to do something about the two Michaels, to, get them out of their prisons. But at the same time, I mean, David Johnston did recognize that, yes, CSIS had... and our national intelligence agencies had some concerns about Han Dong, that, he certainly had some links to the Chinese consulate in Toronto, that he was close to them, he was meeting with them. So all these things are still out there. And I feel like we're not really looking into this and looking into this further. Instead, what we're hearing is simply, Han Dong saying, look, David Johnston's report is out. I'm okay. I want to rejoin the Liberal caucus, and that might actually happen quite soon.
Presumably, the basis for David Johnston saying that the Global report was false is in the top secret confidential annex, which some those people with top secret clearance will be able to see. It's not quite clear to me how he could be so categoric that the report was wrong and that Han Dong did not recommend that the two Michaels be kept in jail to the Chinese consulate. But I guess that may all come out in the wash. Can we turn to the politics of it and the politics of the fallout? I mean, it seems to me that the Prime Minister will be very happy with this outcome. He's been pretty much exonerated from any blame on the process side, communication breakdowns. It seems to me has been laid at the door of the security agencies and the bureaucracy. The public hearings, which David Johnston will hold, we don't know when, but presumably in the fall, will be looking forward, not back. And it does look like it has gotten him out of a pretty sticky situation. Ryan?
Yeah, I would say so. It seems to exonerate the Prime Minister and his ministers specifically of any failures. That they didn't see this intelligence is what comes up over and over again, or that the intelligence didn't say what some people have reported it as saying. I think it also gave him, so David Johnston has said that the opposition leaders should read his confidential report. They should get this top secret clearance. And you have heard the Prime Minister since this report came down saying, challenging Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre to do just that. And I think gives the Liberals the opportunity to say, if you were really interested in solving this problem, you'd read that report, you'd get that top secret clearance. And I think it gives them an opportunity to paint the Conservatives and the other opposition parties as part of this problem, not just themselves.
Do you think Poilievre and Blanchette of the Bloc are justified in refusing that security briefing, Ryan?
I can argue both sides of it because, of course, if they get this top secret security clearance briefing, they won't be able to talk about what they've read. They won't be able to say if they disagree with. They'll be able to say if they disagree with David Johnston's conclusions, but they won't be able to say why. They won't be able to say what the intelligence that they read says differently than then. That said, both of those opposition leaders have said that this is a serious issue, that this is a real problem for Canadian democracy. I think if you want to prove that you are serious on that file, not gathering all the information creates a problem for you.
Catherine, I would imagine that the Conservatives aren't too unhappy about this either. It gives Pierre Poilievre something to hyperventilate about, and he likes doing that. And I would imagine a lot of Canadians are buying his line that this is pretty much a cover-up. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, really, David Johnston, I think, played into Pierre Poilievre's game, right? Because, the best case scenario for the Conservatives was basically what happened, I think, is that, look, David Johnston is coming out. He has links with the Prime Minister. He described them extensively because he was asked repeatedly by reporters at the press conference right after the report was released, why he was the right person for the job and why he was the right person to conduct these public hearings. And, he went on explaining his multiple ski trips with the Trudeau family when the current prime minister was a child. And basically, look, so Pierre Poilievre can then come out and say, well, look, David Johnston, not only has he has some links with the Trudeau family, and he was close to the prime minister, especially years ago, but now he's not recommending a public inquiry, and he's doing quite the opposite, and he's completely, ignoring the main problem here, which is that, a lot of Canadians are feeling threatened by Beijing and are being harassed. And, essentially the government has done not much about it until now. So this is really playing into Pierre Poilievre's game, and it's just giving him a lot more arguments. And again, it's not just the Conservatives; all the opposition parties are calling for a public inquiry, and they're going to be taking steps to rile this up and try to get the government to do something. Well,
I was going to ask you, what about the NDP? Because we know that Singh wants a public inquiry, but it doesn't look like he's going to bring down the government over this.
No, as usual, each time he's asked about this, right? Because he has, the balance of power here. And, each time he says, look, I don't want an election right now. I don't think I want to bring down the government because of this. This is not a decision that we're making today. At the same time, Jagmeet Singh, I think it's worth mentioning, is the only leader, well, except Elizabeth May, who says that he's ready to look at those confidential documents and this confidential report. So, he's kind of, accepting this compromise in a sense, while at the same time advocating for a public inquiry.
So let's take a step back finally. In the long run, I don't think this has the legs to make it through the summer, to be a hot issue in the fall, far less next year. And the thing we saw with the Rouleau Commission, it was yesterday's breakfast, the day after it landed. I think while a public inquiry might have produced the kind of drip, drip, drip of bad or unexpected news, the public hearings are not likely to do that. They'll be relatively anodyne. And this thing is likely to just fade from memory. At least it gives the government some cover. It allows them to muddy the waters, if you like, and therefore Canadians just get confused and bored and move on. What do you think, Ryan?
I think that definitely has the potential to be true. I think what we've seen, though, from David Johnston's report is that the intelligence leaks were coming from people who felt either CSIS or the government writ large were not taking these issues seriously. I will be very intrigued to see if those people feel satisfied by Johnston's report, because if they aren't, I suspect there are more leaks coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a very good point, because the thing was kind of dying a little bit, and then the Michael Chong news came out, and that gave it new life. So I think that would be a caveat I would add to the statement I just made. Catherine, the last word to you. You know, no election is ever about just one thing, but is this material to the re-election of, or otherwise, of the Trudeau Liberals?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I think an election, in my opinion, is going to come sooner rather than later. I don't think we're going to wait until 2025 necessarily to have an election. So, you know, the Trudeau government needed a report, needed a clean bill of health before they went into an election. It seems like that's what they're hoping to get with Johnston's report. And at the same time, I mean, look, we've already, and Ryan has spoken about this, but we've already seen the Prime Minister with his argument saying, look, the Conservative leader is not serious about this. I mean, if he was a serious leader, if he was taking this seriously, he would be looking at the confidential report and the confidential information on the intelligence that David Johnston saw. So we're really seeing some lines coming out, I think, that will be used until the next election. And Pierre Poilievre, on the other hand, you know, he can say, look, the Liberals did not want to delve into this issue of foreign interference. They're hiding something, and they asked one of their good friends, David Johnston, to, you know, essentially cover up for them. So I think the lines of attack are very clear. And I think this is something that we'll be hearing in, you know, for months and months to come.
Okay, well, we'll stop there. Thanks to both of you. Thanks for all the shoe leather that you wear out in Parliament Hill. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you, John.